welcome to this episode of Star Wars Playtime, where I play the old Star Wars games, so you don't have to. Thanks so much for watching. It's hard to believe that this has been going for 2 years now. 24 Star Wars games revisited to see if they stood the test of time. The idea for this series came to me when I replayed Rogue Squadron 2, Rogue Leader, for Star Wars Day in 2020. I loved the experience so much that I wanted to see how other Star Wars games I'd played over the years had originally handled. I wanted to play the games I'd played before in the same way that I'd played them, meaning on the same platform. I've expanded my collection over the last couple of years and now have over 50 Star Wars titles, not counting the duplicate titles that got released over multiple different systems. If we add in those, the total gets closer to 80. Lately, I've been thinking about those duplicate titles, the games that got released over multiple platforms. Some of those systems had vastly different capabilities and even different control schemes. But how much different were they? So that's how I'm celebrating the second anniversary of Star Wars Playtime. I'm picking 5 games that I've revisited over the last 2 years and giving them a go on a different platform. Let's see if there's any major differences there. I'm not going full on with them though. Gonna think about maybe an hour into each of them, which should give me a good indication of how they play and if there's any major differences. So sit back, relax, maybe like, comment and subscribe, and enjoy this episode of Star Wars Playtime. Let's get into the games. I played Dark Forces on the PC for Star Wars Playtime number 3. I really loved going back to it on the PC, even if it did have its own little issues, like the resolution on it wasn't the best. I mean, you could get mods to upscale it, but for the most part, I still had fun with it. It was still fairly dated. I did give it a rating of 1 more pass, so that's my second highest rating. So I really enjoyed playing through it. And I was a little bit curious to go back and see how it would play for the PlayStation version. So this is PlayStation 1 or PSX that this was on. I still have a slimline PlayStation 2 that I use to play it on because it's backwards compatible for PlayStation 1 games. And the first thing that I noticed was that it was very slow. Like, the blaster fire seemed to be a lot slower and it lagged quite a bit. And when there was lots of enemies around and lots of shooting. Longer load screens as well, which I guess is to be expected when I'm playing a game built in, 1994, I think, on modern day PC hardware. And, you know, PlayStation hardware hasn't changed. Well, the PS2 hardware hasn't changed. So, yeah, and that was kind of to be expected, but the controls felt funny as well. I don't quite know how to describe this, but it felt funny. Like, I don't know whether that's because I was expecting to use the R3 and L3 buttons for the PS2 controller, because I don't think the PS1 controller initially had the dual sticks. So I don't know whether that was funny or not, having a strafe and going back to that on the PC, on the console. But yeah, it just felt a little bit funnier. But you can definitely see that the PC version was the better version in this, so I'm glad I was able to go back and play that one there. Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, the sequel to the game that really brought Lego into the video gaming space. So I initially played this on the GameCube for Star Wars Playtime 11 and gave it a rating of I know. It's a huge game, and it's just the humour in it and the play in it is just so much fun. For this one, I actually have 2 additional copies of this. So I got the GameCube version that I initially played it on. I also have a PlayStation 2 copy, as well as a DS version as well. So I wanted to have a little bit of a go on the PlayStation and the DS version. So the PlayStation 2 version is pretty much exactly the same as the GameCube version. There's not any real differences that I could really see. Even graphically, they were pretty equal there. The DS version, though, it was very stripped back. And I know that the original DS had a fraction of the power of these consoles, so it needed to do that. But to the point where there wasn't any cutscenes, there were a couple of little in-game scenes that they did, like when you meet R2 and you're giving him the plans to go off. But yeah, it was just very cut back. So I was a little bit surprised with how cut back it was. Like the stages are completely different, but I guess that's a limitation of a handheld. So once again, PS2 version exactly the same. So whether you play it on GameCube or you play it on PS2, great. But the DS version, I wouldn't recommend if you've got access to those other two copies. So this is the one I was really interested in. I really love Shadows of the Empire on the Nintendo 64. And going back to it for Star Wars Playtime number 6, I gave it a 1 more pass rating. But I still love playing through it, but the end stage has kind of got a little bit bleh. But the PC version, and granted I was playing this through Steam, so it's probably had a little bit of work done to it, but it looked amazing for a game that was, what was it, 96, I think? 96, 97? So it looked amazing for its age. And to the point where one of the major differences between the PC version and the N64 version was that the PC actually had fully CG cutscenes. They were voiced as well, whereas in the Nintendo 64 version there was just like comic strip panels that were thrown up with some text in there. So that was good fun. I did find using the mouse to be a bit tricky because it was still in that age where you hadn't got the mouse controls perfected for third person or first person games. So you could use the mouse to look left and right, but moving the mouse forward and back doesn't look up and down, it moves your character forward and back. And there was a couple of times in the platforming sections where I got defeated by that because I've pushed forward in like one of the Hoth levels and fallen off, or particularly the train level on Ord Mantell where you got to fight IG-88 at the end. The asteroid field level and the I've lost it now, Battle of Hoth level where you're in the snow speeder, much better on the N64. The control stick was a lot better for doing that. I found myself swapping between using the mouse to move and fire, which was all right when you were just shooting at stuff, but when you got to the point where you needed to put the tow rope around the AT-ATs, I swapped to keyboard solely for that because I couldn't get it like using the mouse, so that was much easier just going to the keyboard. I don't know if it was because I found some unintended cheese or whether it was just easier, whether the programming in the game is just easier. But the fight against IG-88 on Ord Mantell was really easy on PC. And yeah, I was playing on medium difficulty, so that's, alright. But yeah, I was just surprised with, I just found myself up on this little ledge and IG-88 wouldn't fire at me. He'd try and jump up to that ledge, and when he jumped up, I would just shoot him with Seeker missiles and he'd run away. He wouldn't shoot at me, and then he would come back and land on that ledge and I'd shoot at him again, and it just ended up taking him down. So I actually finished that level, which is the end of level 4, in I think just over an hour. And when I say just over an hour, I mean like an hour and 1 hour and 2 sort of time frame there. So for the record, it took me about 4 hours to complete the full version of the Nintendo 64 game, which had about 10 levels. But I tell you what, the PC version was good, so if you want to pick it up off Steam, I would highly recommend that one. Much like Dark Forces, I didn't know Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the game, actually had a PlayStation release as well. So I did the PC version as Star Wars Playtime number 16 and originally gave it a rating of Return to Tatooine. I do remember thinking that the very first time I played it, I didn't understand what the game was trying to be, because it was more sort of adventure game than it was shooting game, because there were like puzzle elements you needed to do, and when I realized that, I had a much better time with that game than I did as a kid. So going into it with that mindset this time, I played it more as an adventure game than a third-person shooter sort of game, and I was doing all right with it, but it was very similar to the PC, and there was nothing really that stood out for me. The only real surprise I had was in the first level, it crashed on me, which I wasn't expecting, because normally you don't get that on early console games, not unless they're like really, really bad. I kind of thought maybe it's because I'm playing it on a PlayStation 2 rather than a PlayStation, but I don't know, it crashed on me, and that kind of stuck with me and went, yeah, no, well, this game's the same anyway. And then it crashed and I was like, yeah, cool, no, I'm out now. But yeah, look, it's fun for a little bit, but unless you've got some nostalgia attached to it, I probably would avoid this one. So this last game, I wasn't looking forward to doing this last game. So I wanted to do the Force Unleashed on the Wii. Now, when this came out on the Wii, it also came out on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 as well. And I was like super excited to play it on the Wii, because I'm thinking, what more awesome sort of Force game could there be than by using your nunchuck and the Wiimote to go and like just force push everything everywhere. And I remember being so disappointed with this, like to the point where I played the first level and it was that bad that I took it back and changed it out for the Xbox 360 version. It was, yeah, it was ridiculously bad back then for me. So today I played it with the Wii, got another Wii, but I got a Wii Motion Plus controller. So I was hoping that would make the motion controls a bit better. Nunchuck's still a nunchuck. So was playing that, and I must admit it was not as bad as I remember. Don't get me wrong, the waggle controls are still not the best, and there's certain things that are just meh. But like the gameplay of it was still reasonably solid for a Wii game. I would still play the Xbox 360 version over this, but you know, if you've got this one, just give it a bit of a shot, see how it goes. Things that were bad about this game though, the graphics. Like I always remember after the first level, there's a transition from little baby Starkiller's face to adult Starkiller's face, and like there's a change on his expression, and it's really quite evident in that on the Xbox 360. But on the Wii U, it was just bland, like there is no facial expressions at all. And they even cut out parts of the cutscenes, because there was a cutscene when you meet grown-up Starkiller where Proxy, his droid, uses a hollow shield of Obi-Wan Kenobi and attacks Starkiller. That wasn't in this opening bit at all. Yeah. The QuickTime events were a bit pointless. I mean, QuickTime events at the best of times are pointless, but at least on a Xbox 360 was like press this button and press this button, press this button. On the Wii, it was shake the nunchuck, shake the Wiimote, shake the Wiimote, and it wasn't even moving in a specific direction. It was just literally shake. I will say though, there was one bit that I really did like, where it was sometimes you can get into like these force battles. So like Ram Kota's the first boss that you fight as Starkiller, and I threw lightning at him and he sort of pushed back, and you got into this lock and you had to rotate either the nunchuck or the Wiimote and then push, and that's how you would get an advantage in it, which I quite liked. I quite liked that the way that did that. It added a little bit more to it. I also love that because the Wii's menus are all based on where you're pointing, it had the infrared thing in the sensor bar. So you would point at the screen, and what you were pointing at the screen was a red lightsaber. Really liked that. I thought it was just a nice little touch for what you were doing in there. And I loved that instead of just having like a level select screen, you had a hub. So your ship was the hub. It wasn't very big, you couldn't really walk around it. Like, I'm not talking about something like in Jedi Fallen Order where you could like walk around the ship and see everything there. But you could like look around, you could put other crystals in your lightsaber, and you could access stuff there. I don't know, I just kind of liked the hub world and made the ship feel more homely, I guess. But yeah, it was better than I remember, but if you have the choice, definitely play the Xbox 360 version. So there you have it, a quick rundown on a few Star Wars games that I've already played, but on different systems. It's interesting to me that the PC versions of the game seem to be a lot better on the whole. I've never subscribed to the whole PC master race theory, but in this case, earlier PC games do seem to trump early console games. It's certainly the case for Shadows of the Empire and Dark Forces. One of the reasons I love doing this series is when a game challenges my expectations. Seeing the Wii version of The Force Unleashed being more fun than I remember just makes me wonder if I'd gotten sick of Wii motion controls when I first played it. This is normally the part where I'd give a rating for the game, but I'd already played these games and given them ratings. These versions have their differences, but I still stand by those initial ratings. Instead, I'll say that, like Star Wars playtime as a whole, these are my impressions of these games and should be taken with a grain of salt. Whether I like them or not, nobody sets out to make a bad game, and there are merits to all of them, unless you're Master of Terrascasi. I hope you will enjoy what you're playing, and that I'll see you next time for the next episode of Star Wars Playtime.